Up to now, the stories I've shared with you were born from ancient pacts, from whispered legends and fears hidden in the folds of folklore. These were secrets guarded by communities, by families, by traditions. But there's another kind of secret, a more modern, colder, and perhaps more relentless type. The corporate secret. Large industries, in their incessant search for resources, dig deeper than any explorer, map territories no government knows, and sometimes they find things. Things that weren't on geological maps. Anomalies that defy science and common sense. And when that happens, the protocol isn't superstition or prayer. It's a confidentiality agreement, a mass dismissal, a fabricated bankruptcy, silence bought with money and fear. There are laws that govern our universe. Immutable laws we learn in school. Gravity holds us to the ground. Light travels at a constant speed in a vacuum. And fire is hot. It is the visible manifestation of combustion, of energy release, of heat. It is one of the most fundamental and primordial truths we know. We use fire to warm ourselves, to cook, to illuminate the darkness. And we fear it for its ability to consume, to destroy, to turn everything into hot ashes. But what if there was a fire that broke this law? A fire that didn't warm, but froze? A fire whose flame brought not light and heat, but darkness and cold? What kind of universe would allow such a paradox? And what would that say about the fragility of our own laws, of our own reality? Good evening, or good morning. I am the Enigma. After investigating the secrets of the earth, sea, and sky, I thought I was starting to understand the patterns of this hidden world. But the story I bring today broke all of them. It was sent to me by a man whose profession is to fight fire. And he found a type of fire against which there is no training, no equipment, no logic. Today, we go to the heart of the Scottish Highlands to investigate a series of wildfires that do not burn, and to discover what happens when the laws of another place begin to leak into ours. And before we approach this impossible flame, if you also believe that our knowledge of the universe is just a drop in the ocean of the unknown, leave your like to support our quest. And if you want to join this expedition to the frontiers of science and fear, subscribe to the Enigma channel and hit the bell. Each of you proves that curiosity is our most powerful tool against the inexplicable. Let's begin. The investigation began with an email from the heart of the Scottish Highlands in Perthshire. The sender was Callum, leader of a volunteer fire brigade that operates in the protection of a private reserve. His email was technical, almost an incident report, but the perplexity and fear were in every line. He wrote, "Enigma, I've been a firefighter for 15 years. I've seen all kinds of fires, caused by lightning, by cigarette butts, by campfire. I know how fire behaves, its smell, its sound, its heat. But what we've been seeing here for 3 months, it's not fire. At least, not the fire we know. It started in April. Small outbreaks, always at night, always after midnight, in remote areas of the reserve. The strange thing is that we're in the dry season, but there are no signs of ignition. They just ... start. But that's not the strangest part. The flames. They are pale, bluish-white, and they don't produce heat. In fact, they produce cold, an intense, bone-chilling cold. We approach, and the temperature drops drastically, and the fire doesn't burn. Where the flame touches, the vegetation freezes instantly. The tree leaves, the dry heather. Everything gets covered by a thick layer of frost and shatters to the touch, like glass. We're calling it cold fire. The reserve management called a chemist who couldn't explain it. The order is to suppress the case, call it a rare chemical phenomenon, and isolate the areas. But those of us on the front line know it's not chemical. It's something else. It's unnatural. I'm sending you some photos we took from the last incident. Look and tell me if this is normal. We need help, or at least a theory that doesn't make us feel like we're going crazy. I opened the photos. They were surreal. They showed a clearing in the middle of the highlands at night, and in the center, an area that looked burned. But the charcoal of the trees and heather was white, and everything was covered by a thick, shiny layer of ice, shimmering under the flashlight. It was a scene of polar winter in the middle of one of the warmest places in Scotland. An ice burn, the anomaly, was beautiful and terrifying, and I knew I had to go see it up close. Before traveling, I spent a week in theoretical immersion. I needed to understand the limits of the possible before confronting the impossible. My first approach was scientific. I contacted 2 physicists from different universities anonymously through discussion forums. I presented the case as a thought experiment. Hypothetically, I asked, would it be possible for a combustion reaction that, instead of releasing, absorbed thermal energy so drastically as to cause instant freezing? The answers were unanimous and somewhat disdainful. That violates the second law of thermodynamics, one replied. What you describe is not fire. It's the opposite of fire. It's an entropic impossibility. The other was more direct. That doesn't exist in our universe. Perhaps in a science fiction one? Formal science had closed the door. So I went to the other extreme, ancestral knowledge. I delved into research on Scottish folklore. I read about the Kelpies, the Gilly-Doo, the Wolver. Fascinating legends, but none fit. Until I found an obscure reference in an anthropology thesis about the cosmology of the ancient Pictish people. The thesis mentioned a rarely told legend, the legend of the frost blossom or winter fire. The elders told that in times of great imbalance, when men disrespected nature, a spirit of punishment would emerge. It would come on the warmest nights in the form of a fire that does not burn, but bites with the tooth of winter. The legend said that the flames were the flowers of the frost spirit, and that they left no ashes, but a dust of stardust. The description was poetic, but the essence was the same as Callum's report, the fire that freezes. The ancient peoples did not see it as a scientific impossibility. They saw it as a consequence, a sign. I was faced with 2 explanations for the same phenomenon. Modern science said, impossible. Ancient wisdom said, it's an omen. And my experience told me that when these 2 things conflict, the truth is usually stranger than both. I arrived in the highlands and met Callum. He and his team of volunteers were country folk, brave, practical, and completely shaken by what they were witnessing. They took me to the area where the fires were most frequent. We set up a vigil in a safe clearing, a few miles from the anomaly zone. The highland night is a symphony of life. The sounds of animals, insects, the warm, damp air. But near midnight, the symphony stopped. The silence was the first sign. A sudden silence, as if a blanket had been thrown over the landscape. All the animals fell silent at the same time, and the air grew cold. A dry, biting cold that did not belong in that place. It's starting, Callum whispered, pointing to the horizon, and then I saw. Here begins what's truly scary. About 500 meters from us, a bluish point of light emerged in the middle of the dry heather, and from it, flames began to dance. They were exactly like in the photos. Pale, white and blue, almost ethereal. They didn't rise with the fury of hot fire. They moved slowly, like algae in an invisible current. And there was no sound, no crackling, just a silent ballet of cold light. We approached carefully. The closer we got, the more intense the cold became. It was a cold that hurt in the teeth. It stiffened the muscles. About 10 meters away, I could already see my own breath condensing in the air. I witnessed the paradox with my own eyes. I saw a bluish flame touch a wild thistle, and the thistle did not wither, did not turn to ash. It crystallized. Instantly, petal by petal, it was covered by a perfect filigree of ice, like a jewel. And then, with the weight of the ice itself. It shattered and fell to the ground with a silent tinkle. That was not fire. It was a form of perfect entropy, a reaction that did not transform matter into energy and heat, but simply extinguished energy, extinguished heat, extinguished life, replacing it with a fragile and dead beauty. We stood there, watching the ice burn patch slowly expand for about 20 minutes, and then, as suddenly as it began, the flames extinguished. The cold retreated, and little by little, the sounds of the highland night returned, timid, as if afraid to disturb what had just happened. I had witnessed the impossible. Now I needed to find its source. In the following days, our mission changed. It was no longer about observing. It was about mapping. Callum's team and I triangulated the origin of the fire outbreaks. And they weren't random. All seemed to originate from a radius of less than 100 meters, whose center was a boggy area, an isolated peatland in the heart of the reserve. During the day, we went there. It was a common place. Stagnant water, aquatic vegetation, the warm, damp air of the highlands. Nothing out of the ordinary. But technology revealed what our eyes couldn't see. I had brought a thermal camera, equipment that shows the heat map of an environment. I pointed it at the peatland. The image showed what was expected. The water slightly colder than the surrounding land. Everything in shades of green, yellow, and orange. We waited for nightfall. We repeated the process. And that's when we saw the heart of the anomaly. While the surrounding landscape continued in its warm tones on the thermal camera, in the exact center of the peatland, there was a hole. A perfect circle of dark blue, almost black. A zone of absolute cold, with a temperature that the camera registered as error below its measurement limit. It was a patch of thermal vacuum in the middle of the highlands. There was nothing visible to the naked eye, just water and plants. But the thermal camera showed a portal, a wound. The revelation hit me with dizzying clarity. The cold fire was not something from the highlands. It was something leaking into the highlands. That point of absolute cold was a fissure, a thin crack in the wall between two realities. Ours, governed by the laws of thermodynamics we know, and another, a reality where physics is inverted. A universe where fire is the absence of heat. The flames we saw were not the entity itself. They were just the splashes, the smoke, the visible manifestation of the contact between their physics and ours. They were the symptom, not the cause. The ancient Pictish legend was right. It was a sign of imbalance. The barrier between worlds in that region, for some reason, was thinning, wearing down. And we were witnessing the leakage. We looked at that dark spot on the camera screen, a point of absolute nothing from which the impossible fire was born. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear of a creature or a spirit. I felt fear of physics itself. Fear that our reality, with all its laws and certainties, was just a fragile bubble, floating next to others, with laws that could extinguish us in an instant. We didn't solve the case of the freezing fire. How do you solve a leak between universes? Callum's brigade now has a new job, not to fight the fire, but to monitor the fissure. Measure the cold spot, see if it increases, if it moves. They have become the guardians of an anomaly that official science says is impossible. I returned home with my worldview, once again, shattered. The creatures, the ghosts, the demons of our legends ... What if they are just that? Glimpses of other realities, with other physics, briefly manifesting in ours? What we call supernatural might just be other science? And that makes me think about the arrogance of our own science. We create laws based on what we can observe in our small corner of the cosmos. But who guarantees that these laws are universal? Who guarantees that our reality is the only one, or even the most stable? That's the question I leave for you. What if the universe is not a book with a single set of rules, but an infinite library, with each book containing a different physics, And what if, sometimes, the pages of these books touch, and the words of one leak into the other? How would we call a concept like love in a universe without emotions? And how would we call fire from a universe without heat? Monster? Miracle? Or just ... a noisy neighbor? Leave your boldest theories in the comments. I believe that speculation is the first step towards understanding. If this story expanded the limits of your imagination, subscribe to the Enigma channel and hit the bell. Together, we will continue to draw the map of this unknown territory. My next investigation, it's a plea for help. I received a series of videos from a hospital security camera. The recordings show an empty room, but night after night, the heart monitor next to the bed begins to register the beats of a patient who isn't there. Thank you for questioning reality with me. Until next time.